Let's meet our special guest. He makes a welcome return this morning. Put them together for Richard Herring. Fully bearded.
Safely.
Now, one of our most prolific comedians, of course, Richard was last here when he was sporting or growing a Hitler moustache for strictly comedic purposes. He's on a very different tack, though, this morning. He's plugging a new book. It's titled How Not to Grow Up. We've got a part that's inspired by this, but so very briefly, sketch out what this tome is about.
I think it was just when I kind of hit 40, I suddenly realised that you know, it was a bit of an iceberg that I sort of hit. That I'd been living this kind of childish lifestyle. I'm a comedian, and I suddenly sort of thought that comparing myself to my dad at the same age, he'd been married for 17 years and had a proper job and everything, and I kind of, you know, and I realised I had none of those things, and so I hit a bit of a midlife crisis, but also was kind of interested in the way that our generation, or my generation, is allowed to stay artificially young, you know, for a long time and doesn't have responsibilities.
Do you see it as a bad thing?
I think it's a mixture. I mean, the books, you know, the books are very much, you know, me looking at the good and the bad in it, and I think at the time, as I was approaching 40, I was quite discombobulated by it and upset by it. But I think there's lots of good things about keeping childlike in your life and staying young. So there's lots of good things about that. But they, you know, obviously, if you lose your responsibilities or you just go, I was going a bit crazy, I have to say. As you'll see, if you read the first sort of 6 months is of craziness, and then I kind of settled down a bit and pulled myself together a little bit. But hopefully, remaining, you know, as you say, I've just been having a toothbrush moustache for the last 12 months, so I don't think I've quite grown up yet.
It's going to play on your head.
As a 42-year-old man.
And also, I'm extremely jealous, because the front cover of the book, I know you can see it, is Richard on a chopper bicycle, and I wasn't allowed to have a chopper bicycle when I was young, because my dad said they tipped over backwards, and then the cars would run over and cut my head off.
Well, he was very sensible.
Yes.
You can have one now, though. Why don't you buy one now?
Yeah, because
I'd love to see you going around with that on the streets.
Because we're older and slightly wealthier than I was at 12, if I had a chopper now, I'd want it to have an engine and dropped handlebars, but then I would look like one of those sort of weird old guys desperately trying to cling on to their youth by riding in. Shut up! You're rotten. Now, the book is packed full of anecdotes, like the time you applied to be Pope.
I did apply for Pope. I'm not sure that's in the book, but I did. When John Paul II sadly died, they opened it up, and I thought, even though I'm an atheist and I'm not a Catholic, I decided I would apply. So I sent a letter off. I didn't even get a reply. They're very rude. Very rude.
God, and you got into mischief working for a telephone directory company, is that right?
I did. Well, yeah, I did. One of my first jobs when I came to London in about 1989 was writing the West London phone book. So that was my first book. Although that makes it sound a little grander than it is. I didn't have to make it up. But yeah, so I would change.
But you did make up elements.
I did. Well, I was living with Stuart Lee at the time. As just flatmates, nothing funny about it. And the phone was in his name, so I changed his name in the phone book from Stuart Lee to Stuart Wee. And I'm still quite proud about that, I have to say. And that got through. No one double-checked it.
Now, have your folks read this? Have your folks read this?
Well, I've just sent them a copy. There is a lot of stuff I don't really want them to read. I nearly ripped out. I nearly just went through with a razor blade, but there would have been nothing left. So, yeah, I think they are going to read it. Unfortunately, there's some fruity details in there
that they probably don't want to know about.
I wouldn't like to read a book that they'd written about their sex lives, and there is some stuff about my sex life.
Do you think they'll glance over that, though, in a book about their own progeny?
I don't know. It's very... because you'll get caught out of guard, I suppose. But I hope they will flip. But there'll be things they definitely won't approve of. I did some. I mean, you know, nothing criminal, but things that were... Well, I don't think so. But I was getting into... But they know a lot of... You have to read the book, but... I was, you know, it was this kind of... I got into some fight. I got into a fight. That's where the book starts, which was kind of quite an honourable thing in the end. But that's not the kind of thing I usually do. But also, I was a single guy, and you know, and I got up to some shenanigans.
And very, very briefly, because we've got to move on and tell them about the show. The Hitler moustache thing, I know... I mean, you take it very seriously about reclaiming the moustache. Well, where have we ended up? Is it you're trying to do a special day?
Yeah, well, actually, funnily enough, on today, we won't talk about that too much, but I'm trying to make a Charlie Chaplin Day for his birthday, because he used the moustache to sort of satirise fascism and just to encourage people to vote and use their vote rather than being apathetic, to make sure that the right people get into Parliament and not the wrong people get into Parliament. So we did, on April the 16th, I'm sort of starting this idea where people like a red nose day, but everyone has a little toothbrush moustache for the day. That's what I'm aiming for. So a few people did it.
Did you see the Daily Star the other day, which had Björk Dottmansveer or whatever, this football guy, and they keep telling me, give me a proper name. I'm not going to say his proper name, but that bloke, right, the one who plays for Spurs. And he isn't actually doing, and Natalie knows this by now, he isn't actually doing a Hitler salute there, right? He's actually telling a joke about Mexicans, and he's got a smelly finger.
Right, OK.
But if it was...
pretty bad.
If it was a Hitler salute, which we know it isn't, would that be offensive?
Well, you know, I think you have to be careful with all these things. I think we're going to talk about later. You know, you have to really think about why you're doing something and what point you're making. So I think, you know, there are times when you can, there are times when you can do a Hitler salute, which I think used to be a fairly comedic staple, really. And if you're satirising something, but if you're doing it, it depends who you're doing it to and why you're doing it, I suppose.
OK. But the Mexicans, they can always have a good kicking. That's the one thing you learn about that. Right, here's what's happening on today's show. First this morning, no mentions of the election. After we don't do that...